Okay, good morning, and I hope all is well. Before I introduce myself, I'm going to just take care of a little house cleaning. If you have any questions throughout, just put them in the chat. I can take them as I'm going. Heather and Eddie are going to watch that for me. I probably will answer most of them at the end. And if there's any discussion, we can have that at the end as well. And a big thank you to all Talk It Out for asking me to do this. And a huge technical thank you to Heather and Eddie. Without them, you wouldn't be hearing me, and I wouldn't be here. Because at 9:30, I'm running around like, with his head cut off, and not knowing what I'm doing technically. So anyhow, my name is Joe Mark. I'm a loving husband, a son, a grandson, a brother, a father, a friend. I have friends. I'm a lover of good books and music. I love to dance. I'm an ambassador for Talk It Out. I'm a cat lover, lover of cats. I'm a spiritual seeker. And I'm a person in long-term recovery from an alcohol use disorder. And more on that to come. I want to start off with a little story of when I was 10 years old that I remember vividly. I'm on a small lake in a small rowboat with my Grandpa Joe, and we're fishing. And he's catching all these panfish, and I'm catching some panfish. But he's catching so many more than I am, and I'm curious as to why he's catching so many more fish than I am. And so I ask, hey, Grandpa, why are you catching so many more fish? And he says to me, it's because of the way I'm holding the cigar in my mouth. And I went, wow. Can I have one of those cigars? And he replied fairly quickly, no. And I asked why. And his reply was, and I might tear up here, was because I love you and I care about your health. And I went, wow, I felt a real connection. I felt, an overwhelming feeling of love and connection. And then 3 months later, he died. And I lost that connection, but I think the real reason I lost that connection is because when he went to the hospital, I asked my parents if I could visit him, and they said no. With no explanation at all. And looking back, I felt a disconnect. I was raised in a Catholic family where part of the whole process of burial was before that you have people gather and they say the rosary. Anyhow, I was asked by my dad if I would lead that. And I said yes. When it came time to do that, I was unable to do that. I started crying, and I cried for hours. I broke out with hives all over my body, and I felt really disconnected. And I think I carried that disconnect forward. I really had a break from what I believe was reality at the time, whatever that is, and how much I can feel that and how much I can understand that. And a lot of that is me piecing that together now. However, what I do recall is that it started something within me that I could never have enough. And, I grew up in a family that revered alcohol. there was drinking on every occasion. It was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The drinking was always constant, and it was every day and every night. I grew up wanting to be part of that culture. I grew up wanting to have alcohol in my life. I wanted to be able to do things that my father did, that he emulated. When we'd go out and he'd take me to go pick up fish on Friday night at a bar, we'd go in there and he'd draw out the money and he'd buy, people around the drink. I wanted to do that because I felt and I saw that as a way to connect. I saw drinking as a way to connect. My parents having conversations, I really didn't see that happen much until they had a couple of their cocktails and were sitting around and talking before having dinner. And sometimes they'd continue to have more cocktails and dinner would wait. In going and looking back and things that I've learned, my father suffered from PTSD, and so he treated his PTSD with alcohol. It's something that stemmed from World War II and his time in the Philippines. My mother and my dad's brother, Al, was a full-blown person with alcohol substance use disorder. My mom comes from a family of 10 siblings, and my mom, from my best recollection, every one of those brothers and sisters, and along with my mother, had a substance use disorder. Loved my folks, loved my parents, loved my mom. She died very young, She had cancer, but I truly believe, particularly with all the research that's out now, with alcohol use and linked to cancer, I really believe that her alcohol use and heavy use had a lot to do with that. So my power of example, my power of words were work hard and get good grades at the time, the way I took that. Later in life, it meant how much money do you have coming in and how much material stuff do you have. Nothing with a spiritual connection at all, nothing outside myself. So I became more of a hollow person as time went on. And I also heard, don't drink until you're of age. So I listened to my folks. It's an example of how influential adults can be in your life and how influential your parents can be in your life. However, their message was not the message of prevention. Their message, to me, was really one of two. And so that's what I did. I started drinking heavily right when I turned 18. I went to the University of Wisconsin. I stayed in school because, after graduating the first time with a degree in political science, I stayed in school because I was any bar waiting on tables. I mean, this is a great life. I had no idea what else to do. So I stayed and went on and got another degree in civil engineering. I stayed in school only because I didn't know what else to do. Sort of a lost soul from that standpoint, and this is all looking back, of course. I'm drinking more and more and more as time goes on. I end up getting a master's degree in civil engineering, and I don't know what to do because I'm drinking. And so after I graduate with that, I really don't know what to do. So what I'm hearing, I look around me, what are you supposed to do? Well, I'll get married. So I do that. My drinking continues to get worse and worse and worse. I get married, I get divorced because I'm drinking too much. And actually, I don't really know about that situation because the long story, I won't get into that. But anyhow, I ended up spending a lot of time in Europe. Her parents gave us a lot of money to start our life with. Of course, we just went and spent it and lived in Europe for a year and a half. However, we separated after we spent a little time in Amsterdam. So anyhow, I come back to the States. I continue to sort of get lost. I end up finding a job with Time Life Library selling series of books over the phone. And I fell in love with another addiction. I fell in love with the ideal of closing a sale. I fell in love with closing a sale over the phone. People would get upset with me. When I'd call, they'd say, look, you're calling me during your dinner. And I'd go, oh, my God, really, what time is it? And they'd say, we're eating dinner. And I go, oh, wow, I'm so sorry. What are you having? Meatloaf. I said, it's my favorite. How do you make yours? And the next thing you know, we're having a conversation, and I end up selling a series of books on the good cookers. But all the rejection I got there was fine. It was going after and hanging on to that adrenaline rush that I would get from closing the sale. My drinking continued to increase. I left the job at Time Life Library. The office was actually closed. I was living in Minneapolis, St. Paul at the time. And that office closed, and I didn't really know what to do. And so I ended up getting a job for a major newspaper, the Star Tribune, in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I got a job running their telemarketing department. Shortly after running their telemarketing department, evidently some people saw something in me that where I could probably bring in some dollars, for the newspaper. And that was to get involved in selling advertising. And so that's what I did. And I did that to the point where I ended up becoming a senior vice president in charge of major accounts, reporting directly to the publisher. Thinking all the time that this was really what my calling was, this is what I needed to do. I'm bringing in a lot of dollars. Actually, I'm spending more dollars than I'm bringing in. It's crazy. But it also fed my addiction really strongly because I continued to drink more and more. One of the things that we did often was to entertain clients. And any entertainment client was always around a lot of booze, a lot of alcohol. We have golfing events, always a lot of alcohol while you're playing, and then afterwards. We go to a sporting event, and we have the Star Tribune had their suite. The game would be going on, and I would be serving, tons of alcohol to all the clients that were in the suite at that particular time, knowing that, I've lost control pretty easily. So I would watch how much I drank until they left. And then I had the keys to the suite. I would just sit there and drink until I passed out. Come to, often by people who wake me up to clean the suite. And so that's how my life went. I had a number of consequences for my drinking. I had 3 marriages that lasted very short periods of time because I really didn't have an emotional concept of what love was. The only connection that I had to love was back when I was 10 years old, that I really felt strongly with my grandfather. I let so many other things, particularly my youth, really control my emotions and get in the way of having any real emotion. I had 4 DWIs, where if I would have had those today, I would have been spending time in prison. And so my life became a real mess. It became a mess to the point where my last probably 5 years at the Star Tribune, and I was there about 20, I'm a senior vice president in charge of advertising at this point, and I'm drinking close to a half a gallon of booze a day, and I'm still going to work. However, as that time progressed, there were times where I just had to binge, that I could not go into work. I had to drink. Alcohol had totally hijacked and controlled my brain. And this went on for a period of time, probably close to a year, where I was in and out of work and telling the publisher that all these things were going wrong with me and that I couldn't come into work. And he finally laid down an ultimatum saying that, Joe, in your position, we need to see you. We need to have FaceTime. Your clients have to use FaceTime. Now, you've got a great department, and I was really lucky. I had a lot of really good people working with me that were really holding me up. And in a way, probably holding my substance use as well. However, I listened to him and I said, okay, I can show up. I will be here. I will be here consistent. 2 weeks later, I'm making up something. And I'm saying I can't come in. I'm drinking. I finally get back into the office. He pulls me into his office and says, Joe, we love you. You got to go. Now, most people, you would think, that in a situation like this, would be devastated. That they've lost their job and they had, really lost something that was really pretty major in their life. However, that wasn't my reaction at all. My reaction was one of freedom. My reaction was one of joy, almost, in the sense that now I can do exactly what I want, and that is drink. And now for the next 4 months, or next 9 months, I should say, that's exactly what I did. I drank and passed out. I drank and passed out. I was drinking gallons upon gallons upon gallons of vodka. I drank to the point where it got to a point where I could not drink anymore. I couldn't do anything anymore. All my bodily functions were shutting down. I couldn't even stand up. I couldn't hold a glass of water. I couldn't even stand up to go to the bathroom. So I was just really laying there and probably prayed for the first time in years. And that prayer was, please take me. God, if there is a God, I just want to die. I don't want to live like this. And my prayers were answered, but in a different way. For some, I was in one of the condominiums I had it was in St. Paul, and my father and one of my brothers rescued me, and I ended up going into a 90-day residential treatment program. And that intervention was great, and getting into the 90-day residential program was great. However, I didn't do exactly what I was told to do. I didn't reach out to other people. And in the self-help recovery world, that's getting a sponsor. Because I was afraid of this. I was afraid that I wouldn't do it right. I was afraid that I wouldn't be enough. I was afraid, again, that I wouldn't be good enough. And so after I got out of there, I didn't do the aftercare. I thought I had it. I could do this on my own. I get a place living by myself, and shortly after doing that, I'm drinking again. Now, it took 37, maybe 38 years of drinking to get me to that point of near death. It took 3 weeks this time, just to show you the progression of the disease. And there I am, laying in a heap again, praying again, I'm rescued again by it was another one of my brothers this time, because at this time I'm living in Wisconsin at this time, and that's where I'm originally from. And two friends that I had met, Bob in the 90-day residential program, and his now wife, Sue. And they got me to the hospital. I detoxed. And I started going to some meetings. But I still felt really uneasy. I'm even more filled with shame and remorse. That shame and remorse keep me from doing everything. I'm just not going to be good enough, and what do I do? The Packers were on television. There's going to be a football game on TV. And so I said to myself, well, why don't you just go out and get a couple half gallons, and then that'll be it. Well, I did that, and next thing I know, 3 days later, I'm near death again. And I say all this to show you how deeply and how much control alcohol can have on you. And again, I'm rescued by another one of my brothers. I have 5 siblings. Thank God I didn't have to use them all, because I probably would not be here if I had to use them all. And Bob and Sue again. And I remember this as it was yesterday. Bob asked me, how's this working out for you? And if I'm live, I usually get a laugh there. So this is really different. I'm telling my story via WebEx. And I said, it's not. But in looking back, him asking me that question and looking right into my eye, there was a spark of clarity, and there was definitely a huge moment of connection. I ended up going to another treatment facility, a 90-day treatment facility in Wisconsin. And it was a 28-day program. And I ended up with a really great counselor. The counselor really made me look at my fears. The counselor really made me look at how successful can you be by doing this alone. He really didn't let me slide with any of my play acting, that actor that was on the outside, and not letting anything from the inside out, not talking anything from the heart, not talking anything from the gut. And, bless this counselor, because he said, if you leave here and you go and try and do it again, there's only one thing I can guarantee for you, and that is that you will not live very long at all. And in my mind, I knew he was right. And I knew enough in my heart that he was right that I said, I'll do what you tell me to do. So he said he was going to work at helping set up a bed for me in a long-term residential facility for people with substance use disorders and live in a safe environment. So he did that. And 2 days before I was supposed to leave, that opportunity fell through. The bed that was available was not going to be available. I don't know for what reason, but just wasn't. And I remember, again, breaking down, not quite as severely as when my Grandpa Joe died, but to the point where, boy, am I lost. I am not connected to anything. I'm just really this kite just floating in the wind, aimlessly, no purpose, no sense of hope. And there I am, just, I walk out of the room, and the counselor is coming toward me, and he goes, I've got something for you. I think I might need something. He was a counselor in Virginia for a while and was familiar with a sober living environment in Caldwell County, Lenore, North Carolina, the Caldwell House. And he said, I think that this might be a good opportunity for you. And he gave me the executive director's name and phone number, and he said, give him a call. So I called Bob, who is the executive director, still is today. And Bob said, if you can come up with, I think it was $375, which was the first 3 weeks' rent, and you are willing to work in a furniture factory, come on down. And I went, sure, absolutely, 100%. So I went to one of my sisters and said, hey, look, because I had thrown all my money away at this time, and I really didn't have anything. I was essentially homeless. I said, can you lend me $375? I need this for the first 3 weeks rent at this place I want to go to in North Carolina. And she said yes. And I went to another one of my brothers and said, can you help me out and get me a plane ticket from Milwaukee to Hickory, North Carolina? And he said yes. Now, I knew nothing about North Carolina. I knew a little bit, I guess. I shouldn't say nothing accurate. I knew that you had good basketball teams. I knew that there were some mountains around, and I knew you probably weren't too far from the ocean. But that was it. So, anyhow, what time is it? Okay. A day after out of treatment, I'm on a plane from Milwaukee to Hickory. And it was the last actually commercial flight to Hickory, North Carolina. So if I ever write my book, it's going to be the last flight to Hickory. That's another joke. You can laugh if you want. So anyhow, I end up landing in Hickory, and the assistant director, Gary, and one of the residents of the Caldwell House at the time were there to meet me. And you know how I talked about that sense of connection that I had when my grandfather just looked at me with those loving eyes? That little glimpse of connection that I felt when Bob said, how's this working out for you? There were two men there that welcomed me with open arms, with hugs, that made me feel part of almost immediately. I felt the sense of connection. I ended up going to the Caldwell House. I ended up spending a fair amount of time there because I was never able to put enough money together to go out on my own. Any time I would get enough to have enough for rent and maybe first and last month's deposit, I wasn't able to do that. And so what was happening for me, and we hear this in the rooms of self-help recovery a lot. God does for us what we can't do for ourselves. Well, that was definitely happening to me, because if I had gone out on my own, I would have been using it again. I believe really quickly, because I would have done it alone. Here I was surrounded by other men who had the same singleness of purpose, and that was to find recovery, define sustained recovery. There was a lot of non-success, but there was a lot of success as well. And that success for me truly came from getting connected. Now, getting connected through living in that situation really got me involved in finding a sponsor. And that sponsor came from and having me get over my fears to do that and to actually get involved and understand what these steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are all about. I ended up going to a home, Bob and Sue's home, another Bob and Sue. And I don't think all Bobs are alcoholics, but all the Bobs that I know are. So anyhow, they lived in Hickory, in Illinois. So every Tuesday night they had this book study. The book of Alcoholics Anonymous, we studied that every Tuesday night for 2 hours. And there was a group of 4 men there. More people came in and out, but a group of 4 men particularly that really took me by the hand and walked me through the principles that were in that book. One of them ended up being my sponsor. And it was really the principles in the book. It's people say work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I never knew what that meant. I don't know if I know what that means today, but I do know through their help what the principles are. The principles of hope, of compassion, of love, of caring for your fellow man. And one of those people ended up, Chuck was his name. He passed away a couple years after I had met him, after a couple years after he had become my sponsor. But he taught me a lot. And he said, you and I will spend very little time talking about what the intellectual meaning of these steps are, but rather what we're going to identify them are and what is that feeling? What is that practice? What do you need to do? Anytime I would call him with a problem, he would always respond, Joe, what principles are you practicing? I have a job in a furniture factory. People who've had experience 20, 30 years, I'm there a couple months, and I'm feeling as though I know how to do the job better than they do. Still some really screwed up thinking. And he would go, what? So I'd call him, and I'd want his help a little bit. And he would say, well, what principles are you practicing? And we would talk about a couple, and he'd say, practice this, practice, and then he'd hang up. And I'd get mad. But that's what it took for me to find a path, to find a road to recovery. And I did that, and I stayed that. And so one of my mantras today is to practice. And I'm a spiritual seeker as well. And that part of my practice is a spiritual practice. And that continues to change. And I continue to change with an open mind as well. Because I believe that there isn't just one path, the Creator. There isn't just one path to God. It's whatever path you're on today. As long as there's that connection. I want to tie this into prevention as well. My message from my parents, and actually for all the adults that my parents hung with, through example, was one that glorified substance use. Now, when I talked to groups before, I go, had my mother found recovery, had my dad been in a situation where he had his PTSD and found treatment for it, and I got a different message, what would have happened? And I believe that things could have been different. And the reason I say that is because I based that on a little bit more than anecdotal information. I know a number of people through 12-step recovery who have children that might be in there anywhere from 20 to 40 years old, and maybe even older. And their children never drank. And the reason why their children never picked up a drink is because through conversation with their parents, they realized that they were at risk of a substance use disorder, that they were predisposed. Powerful use of words, powerful use of action. I also, in the recovery community, am a very advocate of prevention. One, I have to practice prevention every day for my continued recovery, for my expanded growth. Kind of a double dip of words there. And that is following a purpose that I found in life. That purpose that I found through finding recovery is that I need to serve a power greater than myself and always be there for my fellow man. And with that, it gives me joy to wake up in the morning. It gives me joy to practice gratitude first thing in the morning. To say thank you, thank you, thank you. To go outside and ask permission from the tree right outside. What recovery has given me as far as life is concerned is unbelievable. I live in just a glorious spot in Black Mountain, North Carolina, with just a tremendous view of the mountains. I found a woman that I truly love. When I said early on, I'm a loving husband. I'm a loving husband, and I'm loved. And that relationship would not have been possible if it weren't for recovery. The other thing I want to touch on, and I'll probably close with this, but I really want to touch on a major step that I believe in prevention. Prevention of use, prevention of underage use, and that's the stigma surrounding substance use disorder, and actually surrounding any sort of brain disorder as well. I was saying mental health issues. However, I talked to a group just a few days ago, and a friend of mine, Tim Lentz, who runs a Catawba Valley Behavioral Health, is thinking seriously about changing their name to just Catawba Health, because even behavior health is stigmatizing. Even the word stigma can be stigmatizing. It's really an adverse negative perception towards people with substance use disorders. And that's prevalent. That's prevalent because what is so obvious to me is that the whole idea of substance use disorder is moral. Now, Do we moralize heart disease? Do we moralize diabetes? Do we moralize a sore throat? No. No, we don't. But we do with substance use. We do with someone who is experiencing, a brain dysfunction. And I know today that moralization kept me active for a long period of time because it made me extremely afraid of asking for help. Because if I would have asked for help, I was admitting that I had a problem with alcohol. And if I had a problem with alcohol, I'm a bad person. And I didn't want to be a bad person. So I think the more we keep this disease in that moral category, the more people are going to die. Even going to 12-step recovery group meetings, I feel the shame and remorse often, and people will talk their war stories. They will talk about their use, and they are like myself in the beginning, afraid to jump into that solution piece. The whole idea of use as well. I was in a meeting on Saturday, and somebody is sharing at the end of the meeting about how he was running this 5K race for something, and that everybody received, as part of their registration, a free beer, a ticket for a free beer, or something like that. No matter what the age, he said, even if you're 8 years old, you're getting a ticket for a free beer. And I went, wow, what's that all about? We're living in a place that not only in my life was like, it was the use glorified, but all around us it's being glorified. So we all need to take responsibility to end that glorification. We need, and your call to action is to talk to another person for the next 365 days, at least one person about this. Because the only way we can end this is by each of us showing that love and compassion is a much better way to go forward than losing yourself in substance use. It also underscores for me the real importance of parents talking to their children and just having the conversation. And it's not, no, just don't do this, but it's having a conversation. And that's why Talk It Out is such a great part of the ABC Commission. To use that website, talkitoutnc.org, I go to it all the time for help. When I'm talking to people, I use it all the time. There's other help, too, that I use as far as that's concerned. But Talk It Out is my first go-to all the time. I use SAMHSA a lot, too, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Association. They should change their name because words matter. When talking about alcohol, or I talk about alcohol use disorder, I talk about substance use disorder. I really don't label people as drunks or alcoholics. I really watch my language. I ask all of you to watch your language. I ask all of you just to have fun with it and then to listen to those conversations. So parents, talk to your kids. Adults, talk to your kids. Adults, talk to adults. And then what happens is kids start talking to kids, and then kids start talking to you, and the conversation continues. And we all take that pledge to really not use. It's been a wonderful life of recovery. I hope to spend many, many more years enjoying a life in recovery. And with that, I'll just see if there are any questions, because I sort of got lost in where I was, and that's time for me to end. So thank you for listening. And again, thank you for asking me to be part of this. And so thank you, Talk It Out. And again, special thanks to Heather and Eddie for helping me get on here. All right. Are there any questions?
Hey, Joe. Berna asked in the chat, I'm not sure if you already answered that, but she said, does it seem most those in recovery began through binge drinking in high school and college?
Well, say that again, Heather.
It says, does it seem most those in recovery began through binge drinking in high school and college?
I don't know. I can't answer that. Do most? A lot do, but most, I'm not sure. The average age of use, I know that some of our literature says 14, but the most recent literature and the most recent predicting is the average first use is 11 years old. So that's, and it's scientifically proven that the earlier you start using, the higher the likelihood is of you contracting and getting involved in full-blown substance use disorder. So the more we can push out that age of first use, because I don't believe it can be eliminated overnight, the better off we are. So one of the things that I really think that is important in the college and even high schools now there are recovery high schools, and there are recovery options in certain colleges, so that people who can identify that they have a problem have some place to go, and have someone to talk to find that connection. So does it happen? And is it a big problem for people going forward? Binging in college and high school, absolutely. However, it begins even before that. Okay, anything else? I know that was sort of a long-winded answer. However, that's kind of the way I roll. You should ask my wife.
Hey, Joe, did you see Jeff's comment back to you?
Oh, the conversation. Oh, okay.
Yep, he said, thanks so much, Joe. I appreciate your call to action and everything you said about destigmatizing the conversation around alcohol and not being afraid to ask for help.
Okay, I did see that. I'm not, it's probably in chat, and I'm not paying any attention to that. So thank you, Jeff. Yeah. And I tell you, my call to action, I take that everywhere I go. I'm getting my hair cut. I'm talking to the person who's cutting my hair about their kids, about other people in their family, about the community. I mean, I sort of just live my life that way. Okay. Well, if there isn't anything else and there aren't any more questions, again, thank you all, and have a pleasant week. And don't forget your call to action. And so I guess I'm going to end this.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate everything.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
You too. All of you have a great day.